Before this video ends, 2 delivery drivers will be injured on American roads. They are not racing to a hospital. They are racing to bring you a flat disk of engineered dough, chemical sauce, and synthetic dairy. You will eat it in 15 minutes. You will forget it in 20. But the history of what you are holding is 400 years old, and it is written in the blood of the poor. This is not a food review. This is an autopsy. This is the history of pizza. And it is a story about how starvation was branded, packaged, and sold back to the people who invented it. In the late 1700s, Naples was not a city. It was a wound. The working class, known as the Lazzaroni, lived in alleyways so narrow that sunlight was a rumor. They worked 16 hours on docks for wages that could not buy meat. They needed food that was cheap, fast, and eaten with one hand. Street vendors answered the call. They sold flatbreads topped with lard, garlic, and salt. Then came the tomato. It had crossed the Atlantic from the Americas, and the European elite were convinced it was toxic. The wealthy would not touch it. The starving had no such luxury. They ate it. They survived it. And in the marriage of fermented dough, acidic tomato, and rendered fat, they accidentally created the most addictive flavor profile on earth. The Lazzaroni did not know they were building an empire. They only knew that for a single coin, the pain in their stomachs would stop for 1 hour. The pizza was not cuisine. It was anesthesia. Eaten in the street, with dirty hands, under the indifferent sun. Scorned by the educated, ignored by the powerful, and devoured by the hungry. The men who ate it did not know they were participating in the birth of a global empire. They only knew that, for a few coins, they could feel full. By the late 1800s, the anesthesia was no longer enough. Southern Italy was collapsing under famine. Men fled by the millions. They crossed the Atlantic in steerage compartments where the dead were thrown overboard before breakfast. They arrived in New York with nothing but the memory of hunger. In 1905, a man named Gennaro Lombardi opened a grocery store on Spring Street in Manhattan. In the basement, he rebuilt what he remembered. A coal-fired oven. Buffalo mozzarella. The tomatoes the rich had once feared. His customers were dockworkers and rail laborers who spoke no English but understood the language of the crust. And yet, something impossible began to happen. Americans from outside the neighborhood started appearing at the door. The food of the lowest class was beginning to seduce the middle class. By the 1920s, pizzerias were spreading through the Northeast like a secret. In New Haven, Frank Pepe built a coal oven so hot it blistered the dough into leopard spots. But pizza was still ethnic. Still poor. Still other. And in America, anything that is other and successful eventually attracts the attention of men who know how to turn difference into profit. The year was 1960. In Ypsilanti, Michigan, Tom Monahan and his brother bought a failing pizza joint called Domino's for $900. Monahan realized something that would rewrite the American economy. He was not in the business of making food. He was in the business of selling time. He created a guarantee, 30 minutes or less, or the pizza is free. It was brilliant. It was also lethal. Drivers began treating residential streets like racetracks. They ran stop signs. They killed pedestrians. They died themselves. Domino's faced wrongful death lawsuits and eventually withdrew the guarantee after years of blood on the pavement. But the damage was done. The American brain had been rewired. Pizza was no longer a meal. It was a countdown. Meanwhile, in Wichita, 2 brothers opened a shack called Pizza Hut. Within a decade, they had hundreds of locations. In Detroit, Mike Ilitch founded Little Caesars and began selling 2 pizzas for the price of 1. The pizza wars had begun. These men did not care about crust. They cared about market share. They replaced fresh dough with frozen slabs. They replaced sauce with a syrup loaded with high fructose corn syrup. They replaced mozzarella with a manufactured dairy composite that could stretch across a television screen. The pizza had become a product. And the product had become a weapon. By the 1980s, the weapon had been perfected. The dough was extruded in factories and shipped to franchisees who had never touched flour. The sauce was a chemical suspension of tomato paste, corn syrup, and stabilizers. The cheese was a laboratory creation designed to withstand conveyor ovens that baked pies in exactly 6 minutes. The coal-fired ovens of New Haven and New York were ripped out and replaced by gas-powered conveyor belts. Every variable was controlled. Every flavor was standardized. The result was a pizza that tasted identical in Anchorage and Miami. Geography had been erased. Seasonality had been erased. Craft had been erased. And the American public did not resist. They embraced the predictability, the convenience, the low price. They did not know what they had lost because the corporations had made sure they would never taste the alternative. The pizza had been stripped of its history, its violence, and its origin. It had become pure consumption. But the war did not end. It simply found new territory. Today, the pizza industry is worth over $50 billion in the United States. Yet the battlefield has shifted from the boardroom to the algorithm. Companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub have inserted themselves between the pizzeria and the customer like digital toll collectors. They charge restaurants 15 to 30% of every order. For a family-owned shop operating on margins thinner than the crust itself, this is extortion. During the pandemic, while independent restaurants were forced to close their doors forever, the delivery apps reported record profits in the billions. The drivers are classified as independent contractors. They own their cars. They pay for their own gas. They receive no healthcare, no overtime, and no protection. They are the modern descendants of the Lazzaroni of Naples, except they are not selling survival. They are delivering it at the mercy of a rating system that can terminate their income with a single one-star review. And yet, you are still ordering. The app is still open. The pizza arrives warm, sliced, and sealed in a cardboard box. You do not see the driver who risked a collision to beat the algorithm's estimated time. You do not see the pizzeria owner watching 30% of the bill vanish into a Silicon Valley server farm. You do not see the history. You only see the slice. And that is the final and most complete victory of the empire that pizza built. The next time you open that box, understand what you are holding. It is not bread. It is not tomato. It is not cheese. It is 4 centuries of desperation compressed into a circle. It is the story of men who fled famine and rebuilt their memory in a basement. It is the story of a corporate guarantee that killed people on American roads. It is the story of chemistry replacing craft, of algorithms replacing merchants, of poverty repackaged as convenience and sold back to the descendants of the hungry. It is the story of how the food of the poorest people in Europe became the product of the most powerful corporations on earth. And it is still being written. Every time you tap that order button, every time you accept that warm cardboard box, every time you swallow a bite without tasting the history inside it, you add another line. You are not just a customer. You are a continuation. The box is warm. The history is cold. And you are holding both.